A drunken insult at a private dinner changed everything. Camilla mocked King Charles's health, never knowing her words were secretly recorded. By sunrise, Prince William had heard it. Within days, titles vanished, staff resigned, and Camilla's royal power collapsed. The future king wasn't staying silent. This time, there were consequences. The hidden recording that started it all. It all began with what should have been a quiet, uneventful evening. Inside Clarence's house, a private dinner was held for a small circle of senior aides and a few close friends. It was supposed to be low-key. A few toasts, polite conversation, nothing too formal. But the mood shifted quickly when Camilla began drinking more than usual. By the time the second bottle of wine was opened, her tone had turned bitter. At first, it was little digs. Complaints about the press, subtle jabs at staff, side-eyes about Catherine's popularity. But as the night dragged on, her words grew sharper and more dangerous. "He's a half-king!" she hissed suddenly, swirling her wine. "Propped up by William like a puppet!" The room fell silent. She was talking about King Charles, her own husband, mocking his recent health issues and questioning his capability as monarch. Her voice was slurred but clear enough to sting. What she didn't realize, a young palace assistant seated near the edge of the room had been using their smartwatch earlier in the evening to record notes for a report. The device was still running, and it captured every single word. That assistant froze. Everyone did. The atmosphere had gone from casual to catastrophic in seconds, but no one said a word. They just let the evening play out, smiles forced, nerves tight. The damage, however, was already done. By 5:30 a.m., the assistant, panicked, handed the recording to a junior aide, unsure what to do with it. That aide, realizing the seriousness of the content, forwarded it straight to William's chief of staff. And by 6 a.m., the audio was playing inside the secure offices at Kensington Palace. By sunrise, Prince William had heard everything. He listened in complete silence, alone in his private study. The words hit harder than expected. This wasn't just petty gossip. This was an attack, not only on King Charles, but on the entire image of the monarchy. "She's trying to tear down everything we've held together," he said softly, barely blinking. The moment was electric. What Camilla had assumed was a harmless private vent, something to be forgotten the next day, was now a ticking time bomb inside the royal machine. Within hours, the ripple effects had begun. Aides whispered behind doors. Phones buzzed with quiet urgency. And one thing was now certain. Camilla had crossed a line no one could defend. The press didn't know. Not yet. But inside the palace, a storm was already brewing. What had started as a dinner turned into a royal scandal, and it was only just beginning. William's breaking point. The final betrayal. William sat completely still, the room dim except for the small glow of the tablet in front of him. The audio played on a loop, each replay cutting deeper than the last. Camilla's voice, sharp, mocking, almost gleeful, echoed through the quiet space. He didn't blink. He didn't move. He just listened. For years, he had tolerated Camilla's shifting moods and quiet power plays. He had accepted her presence out of duty, out of loyalty to King Charles, and out of respect for the late Queen Elizabeth. He never liked her influence, but he stayed silent because the monarchy demanded unity. But this was more than disrespect. This was betrayal. "He's a half-king propped up by William." The line struck him again and again like a blow to the chest. It wasn't just cruel. It was calculated. A direct attempt to undermine both the king and the future monarch in one sentence. William exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself, but the pressure inside him kept rising. He remembered the private warning the late Queen Elizabeth II had whispered to him once, years earlier. They had been walking through the gardens at Balmoral, just the two of them, when she paused, lowered her voice and said, "Camilla has an appetite for control. Watch her closely. She'll test boundaries." At the time, he brushed it aside, thinking it was simply grandmotherly caution. Now he understood. The Queen hadn't been speaking out of dislike. She had been speaking from experience. William stood up and paced the length of the room, running his hand through his hair, trying to process the weight of what he had just heard. The monarchy wasn't a game. The crown wasn't a place for petty insults. Camilla wasn't just attacking Charles. She was attacking the stability of everything they were responsible for protecting. "This isn't the woman the world thinks she is," he muttered, shutting off the recording. His pulse was tight, his jaw clenched. By the time he reached the window overlooking the palace grounds, his decision was already forming like steel. This was the final betrayal. By midday, the shock had turned into resolve. William summoned his senior advisors, quietly, discreetly. No press, no leaks. Just a controlled circle of trust. He laid out what he had heard, piece by piece, and explained exactly why it could not be ignored. There would be no gentle conversation, no request for clarification, no apology accepted. Camilla had crossed the line, and William knew that if he didn't act now, the damage would spread deeper into the monarchy. Consequences were coming, swift, strategic, and irreversible. And for the first time in a long time, William felt completely clear. This wasn't personal vengeance. This was protection. What he did next would shape not just his father's stability, but the future of the crown itself. Camilla doubles down and slips up. Just when the palace hoped Camilla might back down, she did the exact opposite. Only 6 days after the audio leak, Camilla made a surprise appearance at a garden charity event in Kensington. Surrounded by reporters and donors, she leaned in toward the microphone and smirked. "Charles forgets things these days, bless him." The crowd gave a light chuckle. But behind the scenes, it was panic. One aide whispered to another, "That wasn't a joke. That was a warning shot." The press didn't catch the tone, but insiders did. Camilla's sarcasm wasn't just bitter, it was public. And that crossed a line. Within 48 hours, 4 senior staffers resigned from Clarence House, all citing unmanageable conditions. One source called her mood combustible. "She's unraveling. She thinks we're choosing William over her," said a former royal valet. Camilla began lashing out, accusing staff of betrayal, threatening firings, and demanding loyalty. At one point, she reportedly threw a porcelain vase in the hall outside her private office. It shattered. The Queen Consort's polished image began to crack in public. Her smile seemed forced. Her eyes, restless. But she wasn't finished yet. Behind closed doors, she ordered her private secretary to begin compiling a list of media allies. She wanted a counter-campaign to protect her title. Her focus was no longer service, it was survival.
What she didn't realize was that William had already started making moves behind the scenes.
And the next one would bring King Charles face to face with the truth. A secret meeting between father and son. It was a cold morning at Sandringham when William invited his father for a walk through the estate's quieter paths. No press, no aides, just the two of them. William handed his father a pair of earbuds. "You need to hear this. All of it." He pressed play. The recording of Camilla's outburst, her voice mocking, cruel, and calculating, played in full. Charles listened in silence, step by step. His face turned pale, and then he stopped walking. "She sees me as a burden," King Charles finally said. His voice shook. "I've known, but I looked away." For years, he had protected Camilla from the media, from the public, and from palace criticism. But now, the truth was playing in his ears. And it wasn't just about loyalty, it was about the future of the monarchy. William pulled a sealed envelope from his coat. It was a formal proposal, one drafted by his own legal team to limit Camilla's role in both ceremonial and private royal affairs. Charles held the letter tightly, eyes still glassy. "What happens if I sign this?" he asked. William didn't hesitate. "You protect the crown. You protect your legacy." That night, Charles didn't return to Clarence House. Instead, he stayed in Sandringham alone. Sources say he reread the letter 3 times before sunrise. The king had a decision to make, and Camilla had no idea what was coming next. Camilla tries to rewrite history.
The whispers had started.
Inside the palace walls, aides spoke in hushed tones. Something was shifting, and Camilla could feel it. Her instincts, honed from years of navigating royal politics, told her one thing: her place was no longer safe. So she made a bold move. One Tuesday morning, around 9:30 a.m., Camilla requested a private meeting with the royal archivist. The setting was calm: tea, scones, polite smiles, but her message was anything but casual. She asked for a review of ceremonial records, particularly those listing her as Queen Consort. Her goal? Quietly adjust titles and roles to reflect her as Queen Camilla, without the consort. A small change on paper, but a massive shift in power. "I've earned this," she reportedly told the archivist. "It should be permanent, before others try to rewrite it for me." But what Camilla didn't know was this: the archivist wasn't just an employee. He had been in direct contact with Prince William's private office since the fallout from the recording. Within hours, word reached William. And now everything was clear. Camilla wasn't retreating. She was digging in, cementing her status before it could be taken from her. It wasn't about titles anymore. It was about control, power, position. William's next call was swift. He contacted his legal advisor and asked for updated protocols regarding royal designation and role restructuring. The palace wheels began turning. By the end of that week, several key departments had already begun reviewing Camilla's access to certain state materials. And more importantly, her place in future ceremonies was quietly put under review. But Camilla didn't slow down. She began making unscheduled appearances at charities and trying to reclaim the spotlight. It didn't work. The media barely covered her outings. The public? They were already looking elsewhere, because another woman had started to rise, gracefully, powerfully, and without saying a word. And her name was Catherine. The public shift. Catherine rises. While Camilla scrambled behind palace walls, Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped into the spotlight like she'd been waiting for it all along. It began with a solo engagement at a military hospital in Manchester. A quiet event, but one with deep emotional weight. She met with wounded veterans, spoke to children, and honored the nurses who had worked through war zones. The photographs? Stunning. The headlines? Unanimous. A future queen in action, one royal correspondent wrote. Compassion, elegance, and strength, said another. Within 72 hours, public opinion polls showed a dramatic spike. William and Kate's approval rating soared by 30%, while Camilla's dropped sharply. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Catherine wasn't just visible. She was respected, admired, and most of all, trusted. Everything Camilla had tried to secure through paperwork, Catherine had earned through presence. Behind palace doors, the response was immediate. More engagements were shifted toward Catherine. Invitations that once landed on Camilla's desk were now going to the Princess of Wales. Camilla, enraged, lashed out at the royal communications team. She accused them of sabotage, insisting her appearances were being downplayed, but no one took the bait. Insiders revealed she began canceling her own events. Tensions boiled over. Her own staff grew quiet. By the time Camilla realized what was happening, it was already too late. The public's attention had moved on, and the royal machine had chosen its future face. She's not just a wife, one palace source said about Catherine. She's the crown's quiet force. And Charles? He saw it too, which is why the next step came not from William, but from the king himself. Charles makes the call, privately and finally. No press, no announcements, no palace aides in the room. It was a rainy Friday afternoon at Windsor Castle when King Charles made the quietest and most defining decision of his reign. He sat with his most senior legal advisor, a man who had served both Queen Elizabeth II and the current monarch. On the table was a new directive, hand-drafted, sealed with the sovereign's insignia. It wasn't dramatic, but it was final. The document removed Camilla's access to all council briefings, state documents, and private transitional planning for future events. Her role, while still ceremonial in public, was now functionally hollow. "This is for the good of the crown," Charles said as he signed it, "and I hope history understands why." Once the ink dried, Charles waited until the early evening to break the news. They sat in the formal drawing room. Tea was served. A fire crackled in the background. He looked tired, older than usual. Camilla thought it was just another update. Instead, Charles slid the document across the table. "You're being sidelined?" she snapped, reading it aloud. Her voice trembled, half in disbelief, half in fury. "I gave up everything for you," she screamed, rising to her feet. "My name, my life, my peace." Charles didn't shout. He didn't flinch. He simply said, "And I gave you the crown's protection, but not at the cost of its future." She stormed out of Windsor Castle, slamming the door behind her. Staff stood frozen. One footman later said, "You could hear her shouting from 2 floors up." But Charles didn't follow her. Not this time. That same night, William was briefed. The next step would fall to him. Because what came next was no longer a private correction. It was a public removal. The council delivers the blow. Just before 9 a.m. on a crisp Monday morning, a royal convoy arrived at Buckingham Palace. The Privy Council, made up of senior royals and constitutional advisors, had been called for a special session. It was not led by King Charles. It was Prince William who took the chair. The agenda? A formal review of Camilla's position in all upcoming state events, starting with the Jubilee Planning Committee, foundation assignments, and trust fund oversight. One by one, the votes were cast. Camilla's name was stripped from the Jubilee Working Group, all charitable grants, and royal patronage renewal schedules. Her access was gone. Her calendar, cleared. By 10:15 a.m., it was unanimous. And then came the final insult. Camilla, unaware the council had already convened, arrived late, stepping into the hall just as doors were closing. She walked toward her usual seat. It was missing. A silent room, eyes down. She stood frozen. One council member simply said, "Your presence is not required." She turned on her heel and stormed out. Her heels echoed through the marble corridor. Cameras caught none of it, but word spread fast. "That was the moment," one insider said. "She wasn't just sidelined. She was shut out." Press offices were instructed to update listings immediately. Several internal memos went out by lunchtime. Camilla's title was now symbolic only. And the monarchy? It had officially turned the page. The erasure begins, one title at a time. By Tuesday morning, something subtle but unmistakable happened. The royal website, often overlooked by the public, had been silently updated. There was no headline, no formal announcement, but for those who knew where to look, the shift was immediate and irreversible. Queen Camilla was gone. In her place, a quiet reversion to the Duchess of Cornwall. Just like that, her official title, hard-earned through decades of controversy, marriage, and persistence, had been stripped without a single word. At first glance, it looked like a small change, but it wasn't. Her biography, once detailed and front-facing, was pushed down the site's hierarchy. Mentions of her work, speeches, and charitable visits were either shortened or archived. Links that once highlighted her causes redirected to past events, quietly filed under former activities. One insider called it a soft delete. It wasn't a glitch, said a palace IT source. It was deliberate, controlled. The order came from the top. But the erasure didn't stop there. Inside palace walls, royal stationery was being reprinted. Upcoming winter engagement programs had quietly removed her name from guest lists. On banners for official events, her royal crest, once printed beside King Charles's, was missing entirely. And it was happening fast. By Wednesday, aides once assigned directly to Camilla were already being reassigned or dismissed. Some found themselves under Catherine's command, now managing press around her growing calendar of appearances. Others were let go in private, with strict non-disclosure agreements. One day she was queen, said a former senior aide. The next, she was a title in transition. Even her official portrait, once displayed in multiple royal residences, including St. James's Palace, was removed from prominent display. In its place, a joint portrait of William and Catherine, taken at a recent charity event. And outside the palace gates, the world responded accordingly. Media coverage shifted overnight. Tabloids that once championed Camilla's quiet strength now focused solely on Catherine's presence. Television analysts stopped referring to Camilla as queen altogether. It wasn't hostile. It was colder than that. It was dismissive. Meanwhile, Catherine, Princess of Wales, began to assume the exact public role Camilla had held just months earlier. She stepped into patronages, took over ceremonial responsibilities, and did so with a calm elegance that drew headlines. Every photo, every headline, every public event, it was all Kate now. "This is how monarchy works," said a royal historian. "It doesn't scream. It fades you out. And by the time you notice, the spotlight's already moved on." Camilla, blindsided and humiliated, made one last attempt to hold on to something. She requested a private audience with King Charles, hoping to speak to him not as consort, but as a wife. The response came the next day, delivered through an aide. "His Majesty is unavailable at this time." That was it. no explanation, no alternate time. And with that, the message couldn't have been clearer. This wasn't a discussion. It wasn't a delay. It was the end game. And from that moment on, Camilla had only one option left: disappear from the stage, quietly, permanently, and alone. Exile behind palace walls. Camilla withdrew. No announcement, no explanation, just a sudden and total vanishing act from public life. She retreated to Ray Mill House, her longtime personal estate tucked away in the quiet village of Laycock, a place once known for its privacy, now serving as her only escape. Far from the royal corridors of power, far from the photographers, far from the whispering aides who no longer looked her in the eye. Inside those stone walls, her circle grew small. Only her sister, Annabelle, and her son Tom Parker Bowles visited with any regularity. The phones barely rang. Her calendar, once filled with appearances, speeches, and public engagements, was blank. No staff briefings, no charity events, no press interactions, just silence. For the next 2 months, she had no royal meetings scheduled. No one asked for her opinion. No one asked for her presence. And, more tellingly, no one asked where she was. Inside Clarence's house, her absence was glaring, but deliberately ignored. A new internal protocol had been circulated quietly. No Camilla updates unless specifically requested. The message was clear. Her chapter was over. "She walks those halls like a ghost," whispered one longtime footman. "Not gone, just forgotten." And at Windsor, King Charles made no effort to intervene. He no longer spent his evenings beside her. The private warmth that once existed between them had chilled into formality. Their interactions, limited to family dinners or short phone calls, were described by staff as measured and cold. He now leaned heavily on Prince William for counsel, decision-making, and public support. But perhaps more striking, it was Catherine who had quietly become Charles's emotional anchor in public. Her calm presence at state events gave the king the stability Camilla once promised, but no longer delivered. William, on the other hand, maintained absolute silence. No calls, no messages, not a single private word. He didn't need to gloat. He didn't need revenge. The institution had already spoken, and Camilla had been erased from the royal engine that once ran around her. Inside Ray Mill, she reportedly spent hours alone in her sunroom, scrolling through old press clippings and photos. The woman who had once clawed her way into royal power now sat surrounded by memories of a throne she could no longer touch. The staff that remained at her estate described her as quiet, irritable, and withdrawn. She rarely left the grounds. One day, a local spotted her walking her dogs at dusk, wrapped in a heavy coat, head down, refusing to speak. The transformation was complete. She was no longer the power behind the crown. She was the cautionary tale locked behind palace walls. In the end, Camilla didn't lose everything because it was stolen. She lost it because she pushed too far, spoke too carelessly, and forgot one critical truth. In the monarchy, every word has weight. She insulted the crown. She underestimated the future. And history will remember what William took back, not out of anger, not for revenge, but in defense of the throne. Camilla thought her crown was secure. She was wrong. William's quiet but brutal response erased her influence, title by title, until nothing remained, no voice, no power, just exile behind palace walls. What began as one insult ended with royal history rewritten. And William made one thing clear: the throne remembers everything.